Hello, I'm Wendela Whitcomb Marsh, and I wrote Independent Living with Autism, Your Roadmap to Success. I wrote this book for autistic adults. Some of you may have had an IEP in school where other people made goals for you, and now you're an adult and ready to live your own life. I also wrote it for older autistic adults who may never have known that they were even on the spectrum until years later, and are now struggling with what that means for them. The main things I look at in this book, I call the Shire, and that's solutions for housing, independence, recreation, and employability. Each one of those things is addressed in the book. Let's see. We start with solutions, and those solutions include general adulting, communication, social navigation, sensory challenges, interests and behavior plans, and also mannerisms. Many of you may have had adults telling you nice hands and trying to make you stop doing the things that you find help you express yourself or help you regulate your own emotions. And my message about that is you should be able to move your hands any way you want, or your body. Nobody's ever told me to have quiet hands and quit talking with my hands, and nobody should tell you that either. Now, you're an adult and you get to choose. And then there's housing. Leaving the nest for the first time, those of you who haven't yet made that step, and the pros and cons of living alone versus living with other people. And then there's independence. That includes time management, transportation management, money management, self-management. And this is really important because you may have, if you've ever had an IEP, then other people have written goals for you, things that they think that you should be achieving, and then they work to try to make you achieve their goals for you. Well, now you're an adult. You can decide for yourself, what do you want to change and what do you want to keep the same and honor? If there is a habit that you want to change, or if there's a new practice that you want to start and you haven't been able to really make that permanent yet, the science of behavior analysis, the science of behavior in general, gives you tools in your own hands that you can affect change to your own behaviors on your own terms. There are certain steps and components that will make a self-management plan more likely to be successful, and this book puts those tools into your hands. We also talk about self-advocacy and disclosure. Now, self-advocacy is so important, and it's difficult for many people, and especially for people I've known on the spectrum. But this is giving you tools to help you stand up for yourself and say whatever is true for you, and let that be honored. Then comes recreation, and that includes clubs and groups, which can be online or in person, and solitary pursuits. There's nothing wrong with having time that you want to be by yourself. As a child, you may have had parents that said, oh, don't be alone in your room all the time, go out and be with other people. But sometimes it might be really good for you to be able to spend some downtime just alone, and you're the boss of that now that you're an adult. And we also talk about friendship, dating, romance. These are important parts of life. And finally, employability. This is a challenge for many autistic people. And we look at readiness to work. We look at interview skills. That's a tough one. And then once you're hired, now what? How do you continue to succeed in business? There are 5 fictional people inside this book. They're not based on real people. I just made them up. But I wanted to give an idea of how all the different aspects of the Shire could be used in different people's lives. You probably will not be exactly like any one of these 5 people, but you may find things that you recognize in each of them. First, Jacob is 18. He's a high school senior, and he lives with his parents. Emily is 22. At the beginning of the book, she also lives with her parents, but through the course of the book, she makes many changes, including in housing. Zach is 33, and like Emily, he starts out the book living with his parents, but also transitions to living on his own in a very different way from Emily. What works for her doesn't work for him, and vice versa. Maria is 45, happily divorced, and now her 2 daughters are away at college, and she's realizing that she's probably autistic. And Robert is 62, retired, living with his wife and his daughter and grandchild, And when his grandson is diagnosed with autism, he realizes that he too is on the spectrum and what that has meant for him in his relationships and his work life. Now, full disclosure, I am not autistic. And no matter how long I've studied and read and taught and learned about autism, and despite the fact that I was married for a quarter of a century plus to an autistic man, and two of my three daughters are autistic. But you and I know that that's not the same as being autistic myself. I can't really understand everything that you're going through, even though I think I understand a lot. You know that's not everything. And that's why throughout the book I've included anecdotes and stories and essays written by autistic people and also taken from other autistic authors and bloggers that I have learned from and respect. And I'd like, the section is called Speaking for Ourselves. And I'd like to read one for you right now. It's written by Kat, who is an autistic adult. And Kat says, I was in college when I first received a diagnosis on the autism spectrum. There wasn't a whole lot it seemed it could do for me at that point. I was out of primary and secondary school, where a more accurate IEP might have made a difference. The college didn't have specific accommodations for ASD, and yet at the same time, it was incredibly helpful to have just for myself. Being able to read up on the diagnosis gave me a better understanding of myself and let me know that for someone on the autism spectrum, I was normal and doing well in many areas. Having this diagnosis also gave me another way of interacting with the world, of finding other people online who related to this part of my life and who could share their experiences, commiserate with mine, and trade tips on managing life. The process of receiving a diagnosis as an adult can be difficult. I had had other diagnoses in the past which didn't cover the whole picture, but which I was accustomed to. It's not easy to reformat your identity when you've been carrying a whole different set of labels for 15 years or 20. It's not all unmixed relief. If the face of autism had been different when I was a child, I might have grown up with a diagnosis on the autism spectrum. I first self-diagnosed with autism around second grade after reading an article in Reader's Digest, back during a time when autism was seen as presenting with a more rigid set of signs, among them being non or low verbal and having a low IQ and intolerance for touch. After accepting that I couldn't be autistic, it was difficult to later find out that I was. However, the greater self-understanding and sense of community both helped as I came to embrace what makes me, me. I wouldn't want anyone else's brain. It took me a long time to learn just what made mine what it is. And it's a part of me that's worth knowing. That was written by autistic adult Kat. If you're an autistic adult or an adult who thinks you might be autistic, I wrote this book for you. I didn't write it for your parents or your teachers or your therapist or your spouse. I wrote it for you because two things. Number one, I know you face unique challenges that neurotypical people don't always understand. And I also know that you have unique strengths, which are not always recognized, but which will help you as you continue on your path as an autistic adult. I hope you'll read my book and tell me what you think about it. You can find me at www.wendelawhitcombmarsh.com. That's all one word. Let me know, reach out and let me know what you think. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you.